Hi, and welcome to today's session. We'll be discussing an introduction to OASAS applications. First, we'll start with how to access OASAS applications. We can search for OASAS apps, and the results will come up here. Or we can go to the OASAS homepage, and at the bottom is a link to OASAS applications. Once here, we'll be looking at the documentation available on the Home tab. To begin with, we have a document on how to clear your history. On occasion, you may get an error message on the website, and it could be helpful, and often is helpful, to clear your history. ITS has put a document here that will show you screenshots of how to navigate through the process, including brief narratives for Microsoft Edge and Chrome. Next, we have contact information for the help desk. If your account gets locked or you need to reset your password, you would call this number here, or you could email at their help desk at its.ny.gov. We'll be starting over at OASAS application documentation. Again, ITS has posted some documents that you may find helpful. The first is Quick Tips. Quick Tips, again, has their contact information and information about how to navigate our site, including allowing pop-ups, logging in, logging out. We also have narratives about the buttons you'll see, how to address error messages. They have a similar document for login information and changing your password. We then come to the IRM 15, which is the document you'll need to submit to get access to our data system. We'll be talking about that later today. I'll open it briefly just to show you that it is a fillable PDF. We'll be going over how to complete the form later. Below that is a document for the external access approvers for your provider. It's a document that outlines their responsibilities for the provider and accessing data through OASAS application site. And then we have some instructions. There's instructions on how to update the program, profile, services, and inventory, as well as changing contact information. These include narratives and screenshots so you can follow along and navigate through the data system. And then we have the Client Data System Bulletin. The bulletin is an historical document which has different announcements on the client data system. We start off with August 4th, 2024, when we made some updates to the treatment update PAS 26 form, as well as adding some documents to our data system. It also includes reporting timeframes. For example, if you wanted to know when is an admission transaction due, and it would say within 30 days of the clinical date. Below that, we have links to external sites. And then on this side, we have our forms and instructions. None of our forms are required forms. You don't have to complete them, and you don't need to retain them unless your provider requests that you do so. All of our documentation is entered online, so the forms are not required. They're just informational. The tabs are broken down by version, so each version of the CDS has a tab so that you could look back if you needed to on the questions that were asked for that specific time frame. For example, if you found a very old transaction that you needed to enter because it had erroneously been left out, you could go back to that date tab and find those forms and instructions. We'll go back to the current date tab. All of our forms are in alphabetical order. The instructions are right below the forms. The instructions contain the data item and then a brief narrative. For example, the client ID, it will tell you, can be a maximum of 10 alphanumeric digits. It gives a definition of significant other. All of our instructions will do that for each form. Below instructions, we have, well, actually within instructions, we have some documentation for specialty issues. For example, we have a reporting document for CCBHCs. So for certified community behavioral health centers, we have a document that will explain in what situations you're required to submit CDS data and those time frames. We scroll down below the forms and instructions for the client data system. We have the forms and instructions for monthly service delivery reports. Again, forms are for informational purposes only since the data is entered online, but you will again see the form, and then the link to the instructions will give a narrative of each data item. Underneath that CDS information, we have links to some logic information for our data system, for example, cross-edits for discharge codes. So you can look at disposition in reference to status, and the check mark will indicate that an allowable combination. So if you chose additional treatment at this level no longer necessary, you would need to select completed treatment, all goals met, or completed treatment, half or more goals met. Anything else would result in an error message. And we have things that are discharge status and referral disposition, as well as referral disposition and discharge status. We have a similar document for goals. So if you were documenting an alcohol goal, if you had selected that the individual had completed treatment, you would then need to select either achieved or not applicable for that goal topic. And then we have the allowable transfer table. So this document will let you compare two programs to see if you can do the PAS 47 transfer instead of discharging and admitting. So if your provider has a number of different types of programs and you have an individual that is moving from one program to another, you may want to see if you could do the 47 instead of the discharge and admission. For example, if you had someone who was going from an outpatient rehab to a comprehensive outpatient clinic, that combination would be allowed, so you could do the PAS 47, which is quicker and requires less information, less effort than discharging and readmitting in the CDS. Below that, we have batch submission information. If you're using an electronic health record and you want to submit your transactions to us via batch instead of individually entering them, you can work with your vendor to create files to do that. The documentation that your vendor will need is all here. So we have the file specs, and we also have the code tables needed by your vendor to create those files for you. Here we have the instructions posted by ITS, again, with narratives and screenshots so that you can follow along uploading those forms, checking for error messages, and the status of your files. When you're batch submitting, you can submit up to 500 transactions per submission. If your provider would also like to use the web service to submit your files, there's the guide here that will help you do that so that you can not need to manually log in and upload those files. Going back up to the top, On the next tab, we have user guides. Our user guides are available for every CDS transaction that you may need to do, and also for MSDs. It includes things like fixing errors in tracking IDs or the client ID, deleting transactions that may have been erroneously entered. Those guides contain a brief narrative as well as screenshots that you'll see as you navigate through the system. Those screenshots also include boxes, red boxes as to where to click. So you could be viewing this as you're navigating through the system and making those updates. And again, for every transaction available, there is a user guide. And as I mentioned, our contact information and PPSI instructions also follow that same format of screenshots and narratives. On the next tab is the online tutorials. These are links to previous trainings that we've hosted. So if you've missed a topic or you need a refresher, you can come to this tab and view them on demand. The tab will take you to our YouTube channel where you'll access the video. So at this point, to go any further, you would need to have a login ID. So I'm going to come back here, and we'll start talking about the IRM 15. So in part 1 of the IRM 15, it contains the name and contact information for the individual seeking access. You'll need to create a keyword that is used for security purposes, so it should be a word that you can easily remember. If you need to reset your password, if you get locked out, you'll need that word. You'll also be signing the attestation in accordance with HIPAA and 42 CFR Part 2. Also in Section 1, you'll be including your email and your telephone number, work email and phone number. Section 2, you complete either as a provider or as the LGU local government unit for your county. Do not complete both rows 2A and 2B. Select one and complete that row. You then add the address of the provider, and that is your provider address, not your program address. And the information you provide in sections 2 and 3 need to match as it appears in the provider directory system. In section 4, you select the data systems you want access to. Most individuals here will need client data system and provider directory system, but you may need other data systems in addition to those two. In section 5, you select options under the provider column or the LGU column. You would not select options under both columns. If you select data entry, you will be entering and updating data in the data system. If you only need to view data, then you could just select inquiry access. Part B is completed by the external access approver for your provider, as identified in the provider directory system. The external access approver, or the EAA, is responsible for reviewing this form for accuracy and submitting it directly to the help desk. If it is not submitted by the EAA, the help desk will reject the form. This EAA information needs to match what is in the provider directory system. To submit the IRM 15, you can mail it, email it, or fax it. And directions on how to submit the form are found on the second page of the IRM 15. Again, it must be the EAA submitting this form. External access approvers are identified in the provider directory system. Each provider has at least one EAA. Providers can identify up to 2 EAAs, and it's strongly encouraged that the provider does so In case one EAA is out for some reason, the other EAA can sign forms and process forms to ensure data access. Responsibilities of the EAA include reviewing the IRM 15 form for accuracy, submitting the form directly to the help desk, periodically reviewing the active user list. To do so, the EAA would contact the help desk and request that list. The EAA is also responsible for terminating access when access is no longer necessary for an individual, and they would do that again by contacting the help desk. So after you have login information, you would go to the Applications tab. Here you'll see the data systems that you have access to. So based on your IRM 15, you may or may not see all of these tabs. For example, if your provider does not have a problem gambling treatment program, you wouldn't see the Gambling tab. It defaults to the Client Data System, the CDS, and here you'll see the tabs associated with that. The links. This link will take you to the CDS, where you can then add transactions, whatever you needed to do by the link. We have links to the batch process if you were uploading files, or if you were testing files, you would use this batch test link. Transaction reports are PDFs of every transaction that was entered. So if you needed to view or download a PDF of a transaction for whatever reason, you could do that here. It will just be the printout of the data that was entered for that transaction along with the date and the ID of the individual who entered the transaction. Below that, we have client reports. We have some things that are helpful in managing data entry. For example, treatment update due report can assist the provider in staying on top of what is due and planning ahead for what upcoming treatment updates that are due in, say, the next month. The client roster report, we suggest that providers view this periodically to compare the OASAS client data system roster with your internal roster to ensure that they mirror each other. Sometimes someone erroneously forgets to add a transaction, and this way you can catch it and add an admission or discharge that's needed. The admission item statistics report is just a PDF of whatever time period you select, and then you can shuttle over information that you want to look at. For example, if you wanted to look at age, I believe there's primary substance down lower. You could shuttle that over, and if you had selected, let's say, a year time frame, it will give you the percentage, the number and percentage of individuals who were admitted with a specific primary substance if that was the data item that you selected. So you would see X% were admitted with alcohol as the primary substance, X% was admitted with heroin as the primary substance, and you would see that for every data item that you shuttled over. And we have that for all of the CDS transactions. The spreadsheet report functions very similarly to the analysis report, where you pick a time frame and then shuttle over the information that you want to look at. It will export into an Excel spreadsheet, so then you can use that for your own analysis and comparison. If you wanted to look at, say, primary substance and age, you could do some manipulation with that data and put it in a pivot table and then look at those two data items in respect to each other. We then have the provider directory system, which if you have maintenance, you will see both of these boxes because you can input data. If you have inquiry, you will only see this box because you can view data. Down here is the PPSI report, which we won't really be discussing today, and I'm just going to quickly go through the PDS. So on the provider page, it's basic information about your provider, the number, the name, the legal name, address, website, encouraged to put in the website because that does help out referral sources such as the Hope Line. Site, which is historical, with open and closed sites listed here. Same thing with programs. Contact roles should be reviewed frequently by providers for accuracy. This is the way that OASAS sends out announcements on any issues that are coming up, emergency announcements. So keeping these contacts up to date is important. And then we have the staff role, which is related to contacts. Then we have the monthly service delivery. Again, if you have the ability to enter data, you would be doing it through this link here, monthly service report, and you would click on that and then enter the program that you're looking for. And let's see if we can, we'll just take this one as an example. By clicking on list of reports, we would then come to the screen where we could start selecting what month we want to work on and then entering data. Below are reports related to the monthly service delivery report. This is a PDF of the data that you've entered for whatever time frame you select. The summary report is where you can view calculations for units of service. So if that's of interest, wanting to know how many units of service you did for a specific time period, you could access it through that report. And down at the bottom, we have patient days report, which is sometimes useful if there's questions about utilization rate and the number of days per month that our system is showing versus what your internal system is showing. This is the report that helps to clarify that. Again, on our online tutorials, we have trainings that go into more detail about each of those things, updating contacts in the PDS, a training about our PPSI, and we also have posted here a training about our MSDs and the available reports if you want to know more about those things. So those trainings are available. We'll also be repeating some of those topics in the future in case you're interested in them. But before that, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us. This is our phone number as well as our email address for data management. If you have any questions about data entry, please contact us. If you have questions about clinical issues, please contact Pick'em. If you have login issues or issues with your password, we have the ITS Help Desk phone number and email there. And remember, that's also available at the top of the application site on the Home tab. Thank you very much for joining us.